to Public Opinion.
Glad to be here as always.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. You know, I really enjoyed our last Public Opinion show with the candidates.
I thought it was phenomenal. My friend said it put us on the map.
All right,
Okay.
then. Hey, I'm happy to be on the map. I'm happy to be on the map. You know, this was a very good week for Joe Biden.
It was excellent. I mean, people have to be just praising him in the street. Life is
Okay.
going to be a little better for a lot of people.
Oh, all right. And Marsha Fudge was finally confirmed as Secretary of HUD. So those candidates can really get out there and dig in deep on their campaigns now.
It is. It's time. It's time for change.
It is time. And even though we just had 3 of the 7 candidates, we are going to have the other 4 next month. So they will have their opportunity to answer questions and introduce themselves to the public as well. So I'm excited about that.
That's excellent. I didn't know that Governor DeWine had to pick a date for the election. So I heard that on the news. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, there'll be a primary, and then they'll have, they'll be in the general election for that. So that's going to be exciting to see who it comes down to. But I'm also the pièce de résistance of Joe Biden has got to be the passage of that $1.9 trillion relief package. It's the American Rescue Plan, and it's going to really help out a lot of people.
I know it's so many people hurting right now. It's going to make a major difference in their life.
Yes.
And it seems like it's been so long in the making.
Yeah.
You wonder how people are surviving, but you see day after day, so many people living in their cars, so many people just desperate.
Yeah, absolutely. Just really desperate. And it's going to be $1,400 per person. So a family of 4 making $100,000 will get $5,600. And a lot of people might say, oh, that's a lot of money, but it really is not. I mean, people have been hurting. There's people who have lost their jobs. There's people whose incomes have been tremendously diminished. So at least people will be able to maybe pay some on their mortgage or on their rent.
Right. Some people are looking at foreclosure. Some people are looking at eviction. For some people, it's just going to be a drop in the bucket to get them. And if they can get back just to even, that'll be a step forward.
Okay. But the sad thing about it is not one Republican voted for it. And you have to know, they have to know that their constituents are going to benefit from this. Are they going to tell them, don't take this money now? If you get any money, you send it back.
Firmly stand by the fact you want nothing from the Biden administration. No, that's not going to happen. They're going to spend it hopefully on some dental work. And then, it just doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
But we are one America. And that's what I should only say encouraging thoughts about that. Hopefully they will get this money and say, you know what, I was wrong in my way of thinking.
Yeah. But the sad thing about it is they were not able to put that increase in the federal minimum wage up to $15 an hour in that. And I thought that was sad as well. And that's what this program this week is about.
Okay.
Whether or not the $15 federal income minimum wage should be increased to $15 an hour. So I'm excited to see what our participants have to say about that. So
this is a great topic.
Yeah, so let's meet our participants for this week. First, we have Robert Milkus. Robert is a retired prosecutor. And then we have Mark Batson. Mark is a chief operating officer at Step Forward. So let's welcome our participants for this week. Okay, and welcome to Public Opinion. Thank you both so much for being participants on the show this week. And I cannot wait to hear what you all have to say in response to the Public Opinion question of the week. So let's get started and see the Public Opinion question for the week. Should the federal minimum wage be raised to $15 an hour? Why or why not? We're going to have Mark start first. Mark, you're going to be given 2 minutes to answer the question.
Okay.
All right.
And it starts now? Okay. Well, I think that the federal minimum wage should be raised, but I don't think it should be raised to $15 an hour. I think that the national argument here lacks a lot of different context, and people pay attention a lot to the sound bites in the media about it when they're really not thinking about it on a number of different practical levels. First of all, number one, it has not been raised though for about 12 years and from like $7 an hour. Ironically, that was, when Obama was first in office, and Republicans have had a lot of control over raising it from that time. But not to get too political, I think that there's also regional context. The states have different minimum wage rates, in places where there's a higher cost of living, like on the coast or in Texas. There might be a need for a higher minimum wage as opposed to states that have a lower cost of living, particularly, states, surrounding Appalachia, and some in the South and some actually out West. In addition to that, people are not really taking into account all the different, what I call stakeholders who are affected by the minimum wage. They just think of the workers and possibly like big corporations that had a capacity to pay. The small businesses, it could end up being somewhat devastating, which, they've already been devastated by the pandemic. And why would you hit them with such higher labor costs right after the pandemic? But at a minimum, it does need to be raised to a reasonable rate. And a lot of organizations who had the capacity have done that. Walmart, Target, from 12 to 15, $13 an hour. And there's quite a few organizations in the city of Cleveland that have $15 an hour. My organization is trying to do that too, but we had the capacity to do that.
All right. Thank you. And your 2 minutes is up. Now, Robert, you can answer that question, and your 2 minutes begins now.
There was very little there that I would disagree with. I agree with almost everything that was said. I'll just add a little bit to it. I didn't know a great deal about it, so I did a little bit of research, and I found some interesting things. One, I was always under the impression that minimum wage was supposed to be a living wage. And I hear that, and I've read that everywhere. But interestingly enough, the first minimum wage was in 1938, and FDR created this, and it was 25 cents an hour. Well, if you adjusted that for inflation, that brings it up to about $4.45 today. So today's minimum wage, without raising it, is substantially higher than what the very first one was. I also took a look throughout the years, and I found that it pretty much tracked the 25 cents, that you adjusted for inflation periodically. But when they created the original law, they did not peg it to the cost of living. So they made it into a political issue. Leave it to the politicians. It gives them an opportunity for both sides to argue and bicker back and forth and to take different positions. There's no question it should be, in my view, that it should be raised, even though if you look at the 25 cents per hour that it started at, it's almost double right now. So I don't think you need to take it and double it again. Also, I did take a look at to see what the actual practices are out there. In Midtown Manhattan, if you work at McDonald's, if you start today, you're making $11 to $12 an hour. And you will fairly quickly go up to $15 an hour today. So, and every state is very, very different. Alabama doesn't even have a state minimum wage. So there may be unintended consequences, and people may lose their jobs as a result of an increase. And so some people will benefit, some people will lose. Being conservative as I am, I would like to see a slow approach. Whatever you do, phase it in. I'm in favor of some type of an increase.
Okay. Well, thank you all both so much. So it seems to me, Vanetta, we are going to have to be the people who actually are going to be more debating these two, because I really, really cannot understand how anybody could be against an increase of a minimum wage that has not been raised since 2007. And so I would like to start out again by asking Mark. Mark, if you're saying that it shouldn't be raised to $15 an hour, how much do you think it should be raised to and why?
Well, I think the fact that the states have some leeway now in increasing it even above the federal has some way of contributing to the stability of it, from a regional economic basis. Because if you go from 7 to 15 on a federal mandate, there's going to be such a very, very serious effect, specifically on small businesses. Small businesses that pay people a W-2 wage. If you're paying $10 an hour, you're in effect paying them maybe $12.50 because you have to pay the taxes, and if you take it from 10 to 15, that tax might go to, $20. So that's a significant increase that people just don't even think about. And let's say a minimum wage in New York might be a poverty level wage, as opposed to, like he said, Alabama, where if they were $15 an hour, they'd probably be living, they probably, as opposed to getting an efficiency apartment, they could get a 2 or 3 bedroom. See, so there's regional differences that have to be taken into account. And if I did move it, it might be more along the lines of graduating up to about between 11 to 12, I would say.
Okay, and then are you saying, when you're saying gradual, because that's another thing, this was proposed as and I thought this was ridiculous also, as a gradual increase. It wasn't even supposed to be right away.
It's a step. It's
up
steps.
until 2025. So
Yeah.
that's 4 years for people to get $15 an hour. And
Right.
so Robert, you're saying that you think there should be some type of increase, but not up to 15 as well?
Yes, and I would very much be in favor of a step increases. But I would want to back up a couple of things that you said, though, Pam, about there being no raise since 2009. That's not something unusual. Minimum wage, there've only been, since it was the very first minimum wage in 1938, it's only been raised 12 times. So it's not unusual for there to be long periods of time. And when it is raised, it's very little. I also would like to say that right now, as far as minimum wage workers go, they make up a very, very small number of people. Of all hourly workers, they make up 2.1% in 2018. 2% of all hourly workers. So it's affecting very few people. To give you an example, it was 13.4 of the percentage of all hourly workers in 1979. So workers are clearly doing better at the low ends.
Can you believe this?
No, because what you're saying is, Robert, how are you saying they're doing better? They're the working poor. They can't survive. The minimum wage right now is.
Okay, thank you, because that was my next topic, was the working poor.
Okay.
Working poor being defined is twice the poverty rate. The poverty rate right now is $12,760, which means at current minimum wage, that for one person,
No, it's actually 16,000, the national poverty line for 2 people, for a 2-person family.
And Robert, everything has shades. When you're saying that only 2% of people make minimum wage, that's because I got a nickel raise. So now I make $8.85. Okay, because I stayed there my 6 months.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
It's shades of it. It's shades of the same coin.
It's not. I think that you have to look at, there's no question. And I wanted to get to the working poor. That's another category. Right now, I just wanted to deal with the issue of a person getting minimum wage or less. And there are plenty of people make less than minimum wage and without violating the law. They're not,
Right.
they're independent contractors. You drive an Uber cab, you're an independent contractor. Minimum wage laws, federal or state, do not apply to you. So you can be making less. And those people are not affected. You won't be helping those people. They're living beneath the poverty level and they're not helping. They're not being helped by any increase. My feeling is, I don't know why so much energy is spent on the minimum wage. I think we have a real problem in this country, and that is that people are living in the category you talked about, the working poor. That's where we have a real problem in this country. Income disparities, we have a real problem in this country. Minimum wage is not a good way to address it. That said, would I like to help out these few people? Of course. So let's raise it. But you can't raise it.
I think it definitely should be raised, but such a huge increase. The biggest thing for me is the effect on the small business when you look at it across the whole country. See, so in you doing research, I got some of those same articles, not same articles, but maybe some of the same statistics. None of them cited anything substantive that stated the effect on the small business person. Now, and the thing is, I think the fairest way I've seen it is that some of the states have levels of increase of the minimum wage based on the number of employees. So a company with 500 employees has the capacity, to take some money probably from their senior executives and put it to the workers. That's where it comes from, especially like the retail operations. Walmart has started doing it, Target. But if you're talking about people on the retail sector or other small businesses who are actually paying people W-2 type wages, that's a devastating effect on their bottom line, is to increase it that much. And there's no, I think that needs to be taken into account. And in the soundbite world we live in, it's all about the worker as opposed to the small business. Just like in the pandemic here, we're everybody knows that restaurants and small businesses have been totally devastated, but yet we're gonna talk about having them pay somebody $15 an hour.
But the flip side of that too is you can command a better employee. You can raise the standards for
That's
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because we always say the one thing you want is to be a tax-paying citizen, contributing to society. Mm-hmm. But if at the end of the day, after 40 hours, I've got $1,400 for the whole month to live on at $880.
And see, most of the small businesses, and even in Cleveland, there's a significantly high amount. There was a study done recently that said that almost like 80 or 90% of the African-American businesses are sole proprietorships, so they're not paying people W-2 wages. They're not paying minimum wage, you see? So in order to get it there, there's got to be some kind of happy medium, and I think a mix. It definitely it does not need to be $7 an hour. 10 probably at the minimum. But see, as the president says, nobody should work 40 hours and live in poverty, but it's a difference. Living in poverty in New York, you might be making $40,000 a year as opposed to West Virginia. Yeah. So people need to take all of that into context and have some leeway there for the regional differences as well.
Well, yeah, there are regional differences. There's a lot of cost of living. I mean, we're talking about in Ohio, $880 is the minimum wage. That's $18,000 a year. But you're also talking about people who have children and you have to pay for daycare, and you take that into consideration. The minimum daycare per week is about $200 a week, and that's at the very, very minimum. So if you're talking about paying somebody that little about money, a lot of people look at it and say, you know what, it doesn't even make sense for me to work if this is all that I can get. $15 an hour is $30,000 a year, 30 something, and that's not a lot of money. And these, and then what is galling, and to say, oh, well, these small businesses won't be able to afford it, and you're gonna have like 4 years really before you even get to the $15. And you're going to have a hard time finding people to work for those low wages anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just
You find
ridiculous.
high school
business
kids, you
people,
find high school
talk
kids.
to them, their main
Most people getting it are high school kids.
Right. I consider it a student wage.
But that, no, it's a student wage, but that's not all the people who are getting it.
But it's a very small number because only less than 2% are making minimum wage. Most people make more. But more importantly is this, how about others? I look at it and say, you know what? I worked as a prosecutor, as you know. As a prosecutor, how much you get paid? $30 an hour? You want to factor in all of the education, the 7 years took to get it, repayment of all those loans, you'll be making less than a person with minimum wage. How do you correct that problem?
Well, when you go to the store and buy something at the store, and when you buy food to eat, it's going to be the same cost, whether you're a prosecutor, whether you're a judge, whatever it is. You're still, if a loaf of bread is going to be the same cost for everybody. So
sometimes there's just sacrifice. Yeah. Why can't we say, okay, I did go to college, I had the benefit of it, but what I'm doing is saying, when I keep someone in poverty, they won't have this opportunity. I will maintain the status of poverty from generation to generation. I may have to take.
I agree with you. We don't want to do that.
Well, think about this.
It's about opportunity. This country is about opportunity. And that I agree with you. That's what we should address. Why is it that some people are not able to access the opportunity? And it isn't the lack of money. That I don't believe that.
Well, I'll say this, and it'll be controversial, is that, the best way to avoid getting paid the minimum wage is to get an education, But
okay, let's talk about that. Okay, get an education. No, take out hundreds of thousands, all these loans.
No, it's not about the loans.
You still don't have a job.
Is you increase your chances, but see, then with the minimum wage, it has to be a happy medium between some of these ideas we have, raising it up some, but taking into account these regional differences and stuff. Because, if you take it and it's $15 an hour, right? And you think you had the Tea Party, okay, when they put a penalty on the small businesses for Obamacare, and they were the only ones that had a penalty, basically. You're going to really have a problem if you raise it up to 15 with all these small business people out here who are taking risks, and they're not working for anybody. The people who get minimum wage, and people like us who may not be entrepreneurs, or, who get paid by our organizations, aren't taking risks. Those small business people are out there taking risks, and then one of their biggest risks is payroll. So you can't, and if you penalize them by making them pay 10, in effect, double what they're paying now, that's going to be a real issue. And so I think, though, that it should not be, $7 is way too low. I mean, if it was between 10 to 13 in some cases, to me, that would be okay. 13 might, to me, be on a little bit on the high side. But see, and I think if you put in there, I think it's California or one of those that says, like, businesses with a certain number of employees or a certain number of sales, they have to pay certain rates, you see? Because then the way you're taking away people's freedom to engage in business. It might be cost prohibitive to even start a business in an environment like that.
Well, you adjust your sales according to what you have to pay on your payroll. You adjust whatever your costs are in according. When you do your payroll, you have to factor all of those things into consideration. And the fact that it hasn't been raised since 2007 is to me not an argument for people to make now to say, oh, well, they should still just have it be at that amount because I'm going to go out of business if I have to pay people more money. I think that's a terrible argument to make. As a business person, those are things you have to factor in. All of those things have to be factored in.
I don't think we're looking at it in totality, because what are you thinking about the criminals out here? There's a group of people who possibly would work if they could make a wage that would satisfy their minimal needs. But why go to work every day and then come home and still be hungry, or live in a place that is just extremely undesirable? Not have the opportunity to pay for you to go to college.
You said what, Robert?
But see, if you take it from 7 to 15, that's a lot.
What? Hold on a second. What did you say, Robert?
You're supposed to get ahead. When you get a person who's getting a job making minimum wage should be a person that, when I got out of high school, I got a job at minimum wage. I didn't have any skills. I couldn't do anything. Worked in a factory, and they paid me whatever it was, $2.25 an hour. And that time wasn't enough to live on. But if I stayed on that job 3 years later, I wouldn't be making the same amount. They would give me, I would now gotten a little bit higher of a job,
right?
A little bit more money. So it's not, we should not have people who are 55 years old and they just got a new job last Tuesday working for minimum wage. There will always be people in that category. And I feel bad for them, but that isn't, when we're talking about a national policy, that isn't we can look at. It also, to me, doesn't make sense when you say a loaf of bread costs thus and such. It costs vastly different in Alaska, a loaf of bread, than it does in Cleveland. And it's different in Alabama. It's different in Hawaii. So should we look at the highest one and say, look, in order to get by in Hawaii, you need $30 an hour. So it's a national.
We're talking about minimum. That's what we're talking about. That's just a minimum.
So would make a minimum. Well, then if we were talking about minimum for Hawaii, it'd have to be $15, maybe $20. Things are expensive there. Or Alaska is very expensive.
Right.
If you live in a rural part of Alaska, perhaps $30,000. And I think, Pam, that when you look at the poverty guidelines, Alaska is counted differently. The contiguous 48 are counted under one set, and Alaska has a whole different numbers because it's so much more expensive. So we're looking at a national law. That's why we're a huge country. That's why I believe these things should be dealt with at a state level, where they can assess. You're better able to assess what the housing market is, what cost of living is, what groceries cost. It's very different. It was a big adjustment moving to Connecticut. But it's a lot cheaper to live in Cleveland.
I'm sorry. I just have a hard time. I have a hard time with people who are in Congress who start out making $174,000 and do not even want to
pay health insurance.
Do not even want to
raising
minimum wage. I'm sorry. I have a problem.
And you have to also look at it. When you say 2% of people are receiving minimum wage, okay? Those are Black and brown people. That is how we stay in institutional racism. And I mean, and it's just true. You've got to say that. It is us who get stuck in that hole. And I agree with you 100%, Mark. I come from a employment situation. My husband is an entrepreneur, and it would be hurtful for him to pay someone $15 an hour. But the reality is, can I count on that person to come in to work every day at $8.80? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that definitely, and I'm for it being increased, maybe not double, but it's like, if you look at it, and Pam, what you were saying about, adjusting your prices, I don't want to have to pay any more than I have to for my chicken wings and Polish boys from B&M's right now.
But if people are making more money, then they'll have more money to spend on stuff.
It's
you
relative.
can add the economy if you have more money to make purchases and to buy. It only can help to increase.
But some of those
everybody in the country get a raise then.
You
You
know,
know?
Robert, you know
No,
what hasn't
it's bringing-
increased?
It's bringing people closer to a livable wage.
But what has not kept up with the
Right.
standard? You're talking about minimum wage, the cost of an education to give you the opportunity. That has increased 20 times
Yeah.
the rate. Okay, so I could never get it at minimum wage. I can never achieve the cost of a college degree at minimum wage.
No, but you qualified for scholarships that you would
I
not.
qualified for a loan that I have to pay back.
Loans potentially and scholarships.
How did I get a scholarship? Because I got a substandard education.
Right. Yeah,
That's
where
a-
you
okay.
get
that's a good point.
Biden's gonna get rid of all the student loans. So
I mean, obviously, I came out with a huge amount of debt also.
that'll be the trade-off. If we can't get the minimum wage, then get rid of the student loans.
and
I'm
another
all on
thing.
that.
That's a whole nother show. But you know what? We're coming to the end of this show. But I have really enjoyed this conversation because I've got an insight, and I wanted to have an insight into what people who don't believe that it should be raised. I wanted to understand, you know, the psyche or the logic behind it. I don't agree with you all, but I certainly appreciate you all allowing us to have the opportunity to ask these questions and to figure out perhaps what would be the reason that people would not be in agreement, you know, with an increase.
I agree with you, Pam. I learned something, Robert. I know you will say that I didn't agree with you on any point, and that is true. But I did learn something from you, so I thank you for that.
Robert,
Mark, I appreciate your view. I really do. I mean, you talked about the small business, and I agree with that.
Let me tell you something. The funny thing is that I believe that that what's most important is to address poverty, and that's what. So I think you and I do agree on that.
Yeah.
I just think that you think raising minimum wage will be a help in that regard, and I do not. I don't think that's where the problem lies. I think the beauty of America is opportunity, and everyone in this country should be getting ahead. The fact that everyone isn't is what needs to be looked at. I don't think minimum wage was ever meant to correct that problem, and I don't think it ever will fix that problem.
yeah, and I think that big businesses, mid-size and big businesses should pay, and small businesses should get a break.
All right.
Okay.
Oh my goodness! Now that was something, wasn't it?
Now, okay, that one got my blood boiling. That was the
No,
first
I
one.
think that was needed because I wanted to hear what people have to say.
Yeah, it was valid what he had to say, but it was. You look at how can someone see that and live in the same world and not have the decency to say, okay, I may have to pay more. I may have to not go on vacation. I may have to sacrifice, but to make sure that others survive, that others have a living wage. I'm not asking that they have everything in the world.
Right. And I think people are so caught up into feeling like, well, let them work like I did to try to get this away. It's not that people don't want to work. Most people do. I mean, yes, you're going to have a segment of population of people who don't want to work. But for the most part, people do want to work. They want to have something to show for what they have done. But you have to pay them a livable wage. And to have not had an increase since 2007 is just ridiculous. And to say that people are going to go out of business and all of this and that, I think is ridiculous as well, because they wanted it to be gradual. So,
and I think there should be some government support, but here's what we didn't go into, and I really wish we had. He said that FDR introduced it at 25 cents, and it was not meant to be a livable wage. What it was meant to take away from is slavery, basically, because people working for no wage. What was the intent of it if it wasn't to give people compensation?
Exactly. But you know what? This was a good conversation. I'm glad we had it. I want to encourage people to please like and subscribe to the channel. We always have very, very interesting conversations and questions to ask people. So we'll see you next time for another episode of Public Opinion, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion.